my first question is really wanting to center us on the topic of today, which is rural broadband and the impact that has for rural women. So I'd love to, we heard a little bit of your bio, but if you could maybe share what about your story and has now intersected with your organization and the work that your organization is doing around broadband access. So I'll kick off with Tina, as I know there's a little bit of announcement yesterday around Analytics' work on broadband, but we'll turn it to you of how does this issue show up in the work your org is doing?
Thanks, Benya. I get embarrassed and I blush when you read the bio. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just a farm kid from a dead-end gravel road who works hard on these issues and really feel like I found my home back here in Minnesota after spending over a decade in Washington, D.C. and out in California. Just feels really good to be closer to home. Land O'Lakes is, as you all know, because we're in Minnesota, we are a 100-year-old farmer-owned cooperative owned by 1,700 dairy farmers across the country, but then also those small town grain elevators you see that dot the landscape. Very often those are a part of our cooperative structure. So through all of that, we touch, we have a presence in over 10,000 rural communities across the country. Benya mentioned our CEO, Beth Ford. I want to mention, since this is rural women, it is very different, and I feel very fortunate that we have a female CEO. There aren't many. I think there are, what are there in Fortune 500 right now? Maybe 30 female CEOs. But to have a female CEO in agriculture, particularly at a farmer-owned cooperative, it really matters. Now, here's why. She's a woman who really listens intently, deeply, and she's a mother of 3 kids who's had kids at home with her, particularly during this time of COVID. So she thinks about families first, and those farm families that are member owners of our cooperative system. And when COVID hit, she is such a visionary and such a strategic thinker that right away, the very first thing she said is, this is going to pivot and hit rural communities so hard. We need to do something about it right now. So right away, we did 2 things. We started a project that we call the American Connection Project. We just called everybody we knew and had partnerships with already, and just cold called a bunch of people. The focus of this was to really build a coalition to push the federal government to invest in broadband, right? To think about how can we build a 1930 style rural electrification act for broadband, but really with a focus on underserved and rural communities and changing this narrative of success and what that means. And what I mean by that is we can't have success of a broadband infrastructure bill being predicated upon volume. Otherwise, we're never going to get every farm town, every farm, every rural community or rural place with future-proofed access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. So we have 153 organizations in this coalition with us today, really across a lot of industries and sectors. We have momentum, as you guys all know, to push for this infrastructure package. The second thing we did is we turned on free public Wi-Fi at Land O'Lakes owned locations where we turned on Wi-Fi, we boosted it to the parking lot, and then we asked our cooperatives in those rural towns to do the same thing. And then we just called everybody again and said, hey, here's how you actually do this. See if you can do it. So through that effort, we have 3,000 free public Wi-Fi locations turned on in 49 states. The real sad thing about that right now is it's still being used every day. In Q4 of 2020, we had over 1 million unique visitors pulling up and accessing free internet in parking lots and staying connected on average of 90 minutes. So we have a problem here and we need to do something about it. Now, marrying up that action step on the ground and being able to pivot through our coalition and talk to policymakers at both the federal and state level and tell those stories is a difference maker. And that to me is the power of the farmer-owned cooperative system that I would like to say we like to get shit on our shoes and we like to get stuff done, because as rural women, you know that that's how we work. Yesterday, we were so excited to announce jointly with Benya and Lead for America a new initiative called the American Connection Corps. This is going to take 50 young people and place them back in their hometowns. And these young people will serve a 2-year fellowship working on issues related to connectivity. And part of the spark of this idea that we had was, I was staying awake at night thinking about, okay, we have momentum now, we're going to get this infrastructure bill passed, it's just a matter of time. I was really worried about the rural small towns that aren't going to know about it, aren't going to hear about it, don't have access to technical assistance, right? Who's going to help them apply for all this funding? That I'm hearing county supervisors and mayors use words like once in a lifetime, once in a generation, right? How are they going to have the technical assistance they need to apply for some of this funding that's about to come through? So in working with Benya over the last really 8-10 months, was this spark of let's leverage our young people and let's put them back in their hometowns. And what I think is so brilliant about Benya and her work with Lead for America is completely shifting and flipping the question of a young person saying, hey, what can this organization do for me? No, it's what can you do for the organization, or what can you do for your hometown? And as a rural farm kid who success for me, right, and the people I looked up to at that time was getting the hell out, right? And it was never going back. And it hurts my heart to say that out loud. And I just think so much, if there was one person that would have, I could have looked up to in that town of 469 people, that would have had a program like this, that could have had tools and opportunities to give back to their community, and you could see someone with your own eyes, that you can do public service in a different way in your own community, I think that would have been a game changer for me. So Benya, I've gone over my time limit here, but I'm really pumped to be invited, Teresa, to meet with your group today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Tina, and appreciate those kind words. Also want to just give a shout out that our Deputy Director at the Lead for Minnesota team's on the call. So Anna, if you want to just wave, she's also definition of homecomer that brings that ethos of what can I give to both our org and to our community. I think it's a really great segue, Bernadine, to you, because you are a homecomer to Minnesota. And your work has taken you all around the world. And I think very similar, a thread that I love with this conversation is this notion of a global cooperative, Land O'Lakes, also having a deep responsibility to and commitment to their local places, and where their impact is most made. And I think that's very similar too with your story, Bernadine, and the work of the Blandin Foundation. So I know no one on this call is surprised or new to hearing that Blandin is deeply involved in the broadband world, but curious if you can maybe share a little bit about how perhaps your story and Blandin's story came into this field, and in this moment of today, how has that evolved into some of the ways now more specifically that you're addressing broadband, given this once in a lifetime piece that Tina also mentioned. So over to you, Bernadine.
Thanks so much, Benya. Good morning, everybody. Wow, what an honor and a treat to be with all of you. It's just great to see all of your dear faces. There are so many threads to pick up on from what Benya and Tina have said. I'm a little flustered about where to begin and how to best use my 4 minutes. But I did want to say about Minnesota is unique in my experience, having worked on different continents and around the world and in the Department of State. There's something special about Minnesota compared to other places. And I just want you guys to know that out there in the world, the where are you from question. Most people from Minnesota, they say, I'm from Minnesota. They don't say, I'm from the Twin Cities or I'm from, Edina. If you ask other people, we have an identity as a state that is very special. You think about it, all of our sports teams are named for the state. University of Minnesota kind of creates a whole for us. And it's there's something really special about the connection that people see, that one Minnesota idea, we hear about from our governor, that interdependence. And I really have experienced that in my career around the world, where people have this heart connection that Benya and Tina spoke about to Minnesota. I was born and raised in the Twin Cities, and really interested in the broader world. You heard that I went and often worked at the State Department, but before that, when I was 16 years old, I was an exchange student in Sweden, turned out, which was kind of by accident, although that had big impacts on my life later. But the reason I'm mentioning that is that when we're thinking about differences and trying to build bridges across differences that make a difference, whether that be whatever, the main thing that I find makes a difference there is whether or not people have experienced themselves a difference. So people growing up in a small town, that's their whole world. And here in Grand Rapids, where I live, biggest difference that I encounter is people who have experienced something outside of Itasca County and those who haven't. It's that worldview piece that is the hardest one to bridge. And in a lot of the rooms that I'm in, and this is 100 Rural Women, so you're not surprised to see a lot of women in this room, but I'm telling you that women rock and rock it and rock the world. Benya opened us up about women trying to, that the goal of 100 Real Women is to support women leading positive change. And in most of the rooms that I'm in these days, Zoom rooms, it's women. It's surprising. Where are all the guys? But I just want you to know that, so that's not exactly true, because usually the county commissioners, the elected officials, are men, and everybody else that's really doing the work are women. And the women are kind of sitting around talking about how are we going to get some women elected because our guys don't get it. So it's just really exciting to see. I love the mission of 100 Rural Women, and supporting, lifting up women's voices is absolutely critical. And we have it going on in Minnesota. I want you guys to understand how female dominated a lot of the movers and shakers are in Minnesota. Christy Westbrook is on the call here. Christy runs one of the most amazing community-facing, community-centered telephone cooperatives in the nation. And I'm also just full of love for Land O'Lakes, because cooperatives are, I think, really the answer to rural broadband. We can talk more about that in the question and A, but Christy's a amazing leader, unique to have a woman in her role, and I'm just bow to you with appreciation. Our entire Office of Broadband Development in Minnesota is run by women. Angie Dickinson and Diane Cruz, or Diane
Wells.
Yes, thank you. Couldn't remember. And before her, Dana McKenzie. Anna Boroff, who runs the Minnesota Cable Association, obviously is a female. I mean, it's just really inspiring to see all of the women leadership around the state. Our mission, as Benya said, is strengthening rural Minnesota women. And I think there's a story there, people, about an organization that cares about rural, cares about broadband. There are, I mean, it may feel like, what's the crumb? How do you follow the crumbs from rural well-being to broadband? And actually, it's a very short connection. At the Blandin Foundation, we've long understood that everything that we care about is better with broadband. I like to say everything's better with better broadband. And what's so exciting about working on this is that really broadband is the 21st century opportunity key, and that access, or absent the access to broadband and the skills to use it, people cannot fully participate in society today. It's just become absolutely critical. And COVID has helped other people recognize that as well. But there's just everything that we're all trying to do to make rural Minnesota more equitable, more prosperous, safer for everybody is going to be helped by broadband access and adoption. And so I'm really excited to be here today to talk more about how women are helping make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you, Bernadine. And we're going to get shortly into audience Q&A, but I guess really to tee up that piece of our audience part too,